It's the end of week 3 in the United States Southern District of New York versus Sean Diddy Combs. We heard testimonies from former assistants, one who alleges he sexually assaulted her multiple times, a stylist, the LAPD, and LAFD. But there's also some happier news this week. Diddy's ex and the prosecution's principal witness, Cassie Ventura, and her husband, Alex Fine, welcomed their third child 2 weeks after she testified. But we're here to talk about the trial, and y'all know I've got questions. Joining me to connect the dots and break down what this week means in Diddy's courtroom saga is entertainment lawyer, former litigator, and legal correspondent Lisa Bonner. Lisa, how you doing?
I'm well, Carlos. How are you?
I am well, ready to break all of this down, you know? So
Lots
Lisa,
to break down.
a lot. Another explosive week. So Lisa, we know Diddy is deviant and violent. He's been established as a monster. But that's not what he's on trial for. And, you know, I'm probably going to ask you this question every week because we want to keep people on track. Remind us why he's facing life in prison. What are the charges?
He has 5 counts against him. They are RICO. RICO includes multiple acts of arson, the kidnapping, possession of narcotics with the intent to distribute. He's got a lot of predicate crimes that underlie a RICO, but also the RICO makes it come into effect through the fact that he is using his company and people that work for him in furtherance of these crimes. As sex trafficking is principal, which is why I wanted to go last, because we've got a lot of that to talk about and how these crimes tie into the alleged sex trafficking. But sex trafficking is a part of the RICO charge as well. Diddy also has a count of transportation for the purposes of prostitution, and also has another separate sex trafficking charge. So there are a lot of charges that are 5 in total, but they are broken down into a RICO charge and the 2 other, the sex trafficking and the transportation for the purposes of prostitution, like I said. So it's a lot, and it is admittedly very confusing, and that's why I'm so glad we're here to talk about it and break it down from a legal perspective.
Right. Well, let's discuss let's talk about who we heard from this week and what this could all mean for Diddy's fate. So starting with his former assistant, who was anonymous. She went by the pseudonym Mia. So she testified on Thursday and Friday. Talk to me, what does she have to say about her former boss, and why is her testimony crucial to this case?
That's a great question, Carlos. So talking about Mia, who is testifying under pseudonym, but also as victim number 2 in the indictment. And her testimony is key for several reasons. One, it corroborates a lot of the control element that we've heard from Cassie about in terms of the sex trafficking of Cassie, which was very important. Basically, she testified that Diddy was in control of everything in her life, and from her apartment to her music, to her nails, to every literally thing in her orbit. So she talked about that. She corroborated the fact that Cassie was not free to leave, that he had threatened her through his withholding of her music, threatening to send sex tapes of the freak off to her parents. So she was very key in corroborating Cassie's part of the sex trafficking as far as a control element. She was also very central to the case in fleshing out the narrative, another narrative under the RICO charge, which is the possession of narcotics with the intent to distribute. So she talked about the ketamine and how Diddy forced her to do ketamine in Miami. So that was a very crucial element as well. And now she is starting to also testify on Thursday about her being trafficked in terms of, and it's clear that human trafficking and sex trafficking are all somehow a lot of times conflated, but sex trafficking is moving someone across, it could be across the street to another environment for the purposes of unwanted sex or sex with a commercial worker. So that's very important. So in her instance, she tied together another element of that she was sexually abused in various places, which feeds into victim number 2 being sex trafficked. So she was crucial in so many ways.
Okay. Well, earlier in the week, we heard from another assistant, Capricorn Clark. She testified, and she worked for him for many years. And Capricorn, she painted a picture of a mob-like boss who would often threaten to kill her. And she's also the one whom Kid Cudi said admitted Diddy broke into his house when he took the stand last week. What did you make of her testimony, and what does it mean for the racketeering charges he's facing?
Great question. Well, a lot of the assistants, and that's another thing, have worked, as did Capricorn, for him for a very long time. Capricorn, like Mia, and like the former ones that we saw last week, George and the other assistant, they all talked about an element of allegiance to him. So that is important in terms of establishing her credibility. Like, she really wanted to please him. But she also talked about, as you mentioned, the fact that Diddy and his people were there at the scene of the alleged crime of the breaking and entering into Kid Cudi's house. Very important. She was another reason that she was very important and central to the testimony was because she talked about the fact that she really was friends with both of them, and how she did not appear to have anything to gain in terms of testifying one way or the other. It came
You mean
across as
both
very
friends
truthful.
with Cassie and Diddy?
Cassie, yes,
Okay.
Cassie and Diddy. She was friendly with both of them. Again, she was there basically to talk about her element of what happened to Cassie, but from a neutral point of view. She also talked about, the forced labor, which is another predicate crime under RICO, as did Mia, and as did George Kaplan, and everyone who has talked about it, from working with Diddy, has talked about working to the point of exhaustion, which is a predicate crime under RICO. So there are a lot of different elements from each different witness, but they are all feeding into various narratives. But the one thing that we've pretty much seen consistent is the element of control that Diddy had over Cassie. Each person is alleging that in their own way, and also corroborating a lot of the stories that we've heard from the previous witnesses.
Okay, so we also heard from the stylist, Deontay Nash. He took the stand and he corroborated that Diddy was emotionally and physically abusive to Cassie. Now, the defense is trying to poke holes in all of their stories. That's their job. That's what they're there to do. And it seems like their strategy is to paint them as hanger-ons who kind of craved access to Diddy's celebrity and fame. Do you think it's been an effective strategy? And would you say the defense has had a rocky week? Well, let's go back. Do you think it's been an effective strategy first?
Well, it's a strategy, and it depends on how the jury is going to perceive a lot of this, right? And they are doing the best that they can, as I've said, with what they have. Listen, everybody knows Diddy. This is one of the trials that is talked about across the world. So any reasonable person would know that this is a man who is larger than life, who makes or breaks careers. I mean, we talked about Mary J. Blige. I mean, the roster goes on and on. Biggie, everybody. So of course you wanted to be with Puffy, but aside from that, the important element that we are discussing here is the abuse and the emotional and financial manipulation that he extorted, that he held over these people. And so it is very complex. It really is going to go, as I've said before, a lot is going to lead into the jury instructions and the closing arguments in particular, to see how they wrap all of this up, and the other people that they bring in. They're doing the best they can, but you have to, would a reasonable person, that is the standard that they are supposed to take, would a reasonable person really believe that what these people are saying is true? And that is why it is so important for the prosecution to have a substantial narrative that is similar throughout all of these plaintiffs, to establish a pattern of activity that is used through his enterprise. So of course he had great parties. That was part of the Puffy bad boy brand, but that same brand was also responsible for allegedly kidnapping one of his employees, taking her at gunpoint, and driving up to Kid Cudi's house to commit another crime, which is breaking and entering. That's the narrative that the prosecution has to go with. It's very important to underscore and to humanize and to put it into perspective for the jury, so they could, if they want to get to proving that RICO.
Right. Well, let's talk about the defense. Let's talk about the week that they've had. They're begging the judge for more time with Diddy. And midweek, the judge denied their motion for a mistrial. What caused them to request a mistrial, and how do you think that played out with the jury?
Well, that is a question that is talked about this week and is very dramatic. And it did unfold in very dramatic testimony from what I can understand. So, what led up to that was the Los Angeles investigator for the Los Angeles Fire Department. He was on the stand and basically talked about, was corroborating a lot of the arson and talked about the fingerprints and
At
that
Kid
caught
Cudi's.
that the Yes, I'm sorry, at Kid Cudi's house, and talked about the arson that they normally keep a set of fingerprint cards on file, and he would be the one to sign off on them if they were to be destroyed. In this instance, they were destroyed, but he did not sign off on them. So the inference immediately is, according to the defense, is like, listen, the inference that you're drawing is the fact that Combs is larger than life, and he somehow paid these people, and people were in his pocket to help commit crimes when you don't really have any evidence of that. And so they not only asked for a mistrial, they also asked for that to be stated is that was improper in the record. The judge denied both. And the reason why it is important that the judge denied the mistrial is because they want to preserve every element and possibility for appeal that they can. But also the judge refused to strike it as improper from the record because of the fact that that then underscores from the prosecution side that they somehow acted improper as an even greater grounds for appeal. So the judge admonished them and told them they were walking a fine line, but did not grant a mistrial, in my opinion, which is right. But it is a slippery slope, and you have to be very careful. And they were admonished properly, in my opinion, through the judge for what the judge did.
All right. We heard more about, the aftermath of the freak-offs and, the hotel rooms and how they were covered in menstrual blood and candle wax and broken glass. We got that picture. Why are these details important?
Again, the people that worked for Diddy that have testified, aside from Cassie, that was important for her to establish what it looked like, right, to set the scene. In terms of the candle wax and the incense and all of the things in the aftermath that they had to clean up is because one of the elements of the enterprise is that he used his employees to protect his reputation and conceal his conduct. And that is one of the things that each and every assistant testified to, that it was my responsibility to protect him at all times. And again, these are Combs' employees of these enterprises and of these companies. So that is important to really weave that narrative in terms of the fact that they were there to protect him. Now, it was interesting that Mia actually had a checklist that she prepared because Diddy one time was berating her about, what do you do all day? And she was like, well, let me tell you. So she had an email which was very effective. And in that email, it said, protect his reputation at all time, protect PD's reputation, and just very clear the fact that she was there to manage him, to keep his reputation clean, and to make sure that he appeared in the best light possible. So that's a string that goes through the RICO in the trafficking.
Okay. Was there any bombshell or smoking gun this week for the prosecution?
I would say Mia was super effective. I think the prosecution had a good week, but the bombshell, I would say, was Mia. Okay. Because Mia was a very reluctant witness. She said, I would have taken the secret to my grave. I did not want to talk about this. I did not have any interest. Even when I approached lawyers for a severance, I never ever mentioned this. And that was important because she really had nothing to gain. Again, she was there, she was crying, she was emotional, had her head down, she testified under a pseudonym, and even in the court reports, they said the most prominent thing about her is the part in her hair, because she is very shrunken into herself and does not want to really be there. She said, but I was subpoenaed, I have to be here, and I have to tell the story. I am traumatized. She said, I mean, it gives her PTSD. So I think that plays into the narrative from a jury perspective of really seeing that this girl has nothing to gain and everything to lose if somebody pieces the parts together of the puzzle. This is a very small business in the entertainment industry. So you do a little digging and one could easily find out who that is. And that is very dangerous for her reputation, and nobody would want to be famous or infamous for any of these allegations that she has set forth. So she was very damaging and very effective. So I think that was the most bombshell. But all of it was really, this was a good week for the prosecution in terms of building out the elements of RICO. As I have said before, that's what they need to do. There's still more to go, but they are really building an effective case.
Yeah. Well, that was my next question. I mean, you said they had a good week, so, well, you kind of answered it, but in your legal opinion, at this stage, how are they doing? How is the prosecution doing proving that Combs ran a criminal enterprise?
I think that they are connecting the dots. They have started laying out the predicate crimes of RICO. We had breaking and entering, we had arson, we had kidnapping, we have elements of control that feed into the sex trafficking. Those were corroborated. We had bribery, extortion, ketamine, concealing conduct. We had everything to establish a pattern of behavior that was conducted through his business that was that alleged a criminal enterprise. So I think they have done a lot. If they had to rest today, would they be there? I think not. But I do know that they have at least 2 more weeks of testimony, and they have some work to do to close the loop. But if they bring in KK, his former chief of staff, Christine Caron, and they bring in D-Rock, each of whom has been mentioned, D-Rock and the security guard, each of whom has been mentioned 3 or 4 dozen times in this throughout the trial of these past 3 weeks. These are people that were not assistants and working under him, but people who allegedly worked with him. As the chief of staff, Christina did everything that and knew of these crimes and alleged crimes and continued to chime in to further it. If they bring her in and she can establish that she was following orders, and same with D-Rock, the security guard, and they were employed by Combs, that would bring it home and land the plane. Other than that, because these 2 people are mentioned so frequently, if they don't come in, that's kind of like, Now they might have to cut a deal, grant some immunity or otherwise, but they need those 2 higher ups to come in to really to hit it home.
Right. So, I mean, the trial is expected to last 8 weeks, and we're hitting the halfway mark. What can we expect next week?
Next week, allegedly, there's going to be another victim that comes forward again, which will show a pattern of behavior from Combs. So we'll see what she testifies about. But if it's a 3rd victim that comes forth and talks about the sex trafficking and corroborates the same narrative that we've heard over and over and over again about the control, about the abuse, about the manipulation, about the other criminal elements that come into RICO, especially if this person was affiliated, this alleged victim was affiliated with him in any way in terms of his businesses, that's going to be another way to really hit it home. And so we can look forward to that. And like I said, we need higher ups, that people that have been mentioned previously in these lawsuits. Again, I would suspect and hope that the prosecution would bring in the security guard and his former chief of staff to corroborate what we have heard and what each person has testified to about these people knew. Christina was sending emails stating that you had to come back. She was calling incessantly at Diddy's request, that the security guard was either with Diddy in terms of the kidnapping or was one of the people that did something to go and retrieve Cassie. There's so many instances of these alleged higher up individuals that were working with him to facilitate and conspire with him under his employ. That is going to be something that we're going to need to see.
All right, my friend Lisa Bonner, thank you again. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Carlos, and we'll talk next week.
All right, to stay up to date with all things Diddy Trial, visit us at page6.com and on our YouTube channel.